Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. If this is your first webinar, the way I try to do these is not like a typical software demo where everything is clean and perfect and works every time. I do make mistakes. I like to fix them on the fly so that not only you can see the workflow and how easy the tools are to use, but what to do when inevitably something goes off into the weeds. Because essentially, every time you're building something from scratch, it's something that hasn't been built before, and a lot of times you have to figure it out along the way. And I'm going to try and give a little bit of insight into how I approach a modeling project and kind of what I'm looking for and things like that. I practiced this demo once yesterday. It worked well. I'm going to do it intentionally. I'm going to try and do it kind of on the fly so that you see how to approach something that's fairly fresh and you might not have built before. So with that, let's
Kyle,
go ahead and get started.
Yeah, just one observation. It looks like you're using Rhino 5.
I am, yes. Yes,
Okay.
all the tools and everything are the same, but I can open this in 4 if you'd rather have it in 4.
No, yeah, Rhino 5 is fine. It's just to point out that T-Spline's Rhino 5 is a work in progress, and the T-Spline's plugin will work in Rhino 5 32-bit right now, just the same. So,
got it. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. I'm going to leave the toolbar up and fairly large at this point so you can see everything that's going on. And I may hide it a little bit, just kind of in and out of there, but actually, you know what? That's taking up a lot of space, so I will run this. Let me stick this up here in the tab, and we'll go from there. All right. So this is the model that we're going to try and build, and basically this was a quick 2D sketch I did years ago, and I dug it out and dusted it off because I'd never modeled it and figured that this would be not only a fun shape to model, but it's got some interesting complexities going on in here with this little kind of blended detail shape where this steps back and creates a little undercut highlight line back here. And then there's a hole in it for the tail rotor, which I know there's been some questions along the way for, how do I make holes in T-Spline's objects? How do I, specifically identify a shape that I want to make in T-Splines? And so I'll show you how to match a T-Spline surface to another surface, and that way you can kind of snap the shape of the opening and things like that. Now, to be fair, I'm not going to build the entire helicopter. I did go in and I built the blades and some of the other details. So I'm going to focus on the fuselage, the body shape here, and then I'm gonna cheat the details at the end in for the sake of time. So I guess that covers the opening song and dance here. Let's go ahead and get started. Anybody who's seen the iron tutorial or some of the other tutorials that I've worked on, there's a really great kind of beginner workflow that allows you to use only a few tools. And in this case, I'm going to use the append face tool. And basically what this allows you to do is to create a single plane in space. And if you notice, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to click 4 points, and I'm going to create a single plane in space. And essentially that's going to be the building block for the entire model. And let me kill my layer panel here to get a little more real estate. So what I'm going to do, I have my heads-up display active here. I'm going to go to edge mode, and I'm going to pick an edge. And using my translate manipulator and the C-plane modification disk here, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and drag this, and you'll notice that another plane has just showed up.
Kyle,
Now,
could you go ahead and just disable your hotkeys?
Absolutely. So what's happening here is I'm in smooth mode, so you'll notice that the transition between these planes is very smooth. But I actually want to work in box mode. So I'm going to toggle smooth. I'm going to smooth toggle, and you'll notice now that I'm in this kind of quad polygon box mode here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to alt drag using the C-planes, which allows me to work in a kind of unconstrained fashion here. And I'm going to just drag a line of quads to roughly match kind of the shape I'm looking for here. And I don't need to get too crazy about my layout at this point because there's flexibility all over built into T-splines. And I can lay something out, I can play around with it, I can add stuff later, I can take stuff away later. So it's really kind of an iterative process, and it allows me to pretty much experiment with the layout and how I want this to go. So let me take the shade off this for a second, and you'll see the line of polygons here laid over my sketch. Now, this model kind of has a highlight line or a feature line that's going to go through here. This is kind of where I want the highlight to break. So I'm going to switch into Verts mode by clicking up in the heads-up display here, and I'm going to just pick some verts, and I'm going to go to my translate manipulator, and I'm just going to drag these kind of where I want them. And think about this like you're laying out kind of a 2D flat paper pattern for what this thing is going to look like. And we'll get to the 3D part where we start adding shape later. But for now, we're just doing paper dolls.
Yeah, just to clarify, right now as Kyle's moving the manipulator, he's just dragging the manipulator, whereas before he was holding down the Alt key, and that was how you use the manipulator to actually grow and add geometry.
Right. Alt adds geometry. No Alt just moves geometry. So the other thing that I want to think about is where these things are positioned, and I want to kind of position these where transitions should be. I have a line of edges running down here because there's going to be a break. This model's going to start rolling under here, and I have a line of verts right here, a line of edge, and a vertical edge right here because the model kind of breaks and starts returning down towards the tail section here. So I want to think about this. T-splines essentially is an exercise in interpolation, and so these points are going to be interpolated smoothly when we go from box mode to smooth mode, and allow T-splines to then calculate the smooth surface between this. So we're creating kind of the anchor points for where this is going to get interpolated through. So if there's going to be a break here, this is your high point, it would make sense to have, your high point in box mode be somewhere near where you want that to go. If there's a transition here, it would make sense for, your patch layout to follow that kind of in a logical manner. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add a line of edges for the canopy here, for the motor housing. And so I'm going to alt drag up a small row, which is basically going to allow me to create a transition later as it wraps from the cab smoothly into the motor housing. And then I'm going to go up one more time to create the actual body. And again, this is all just paper dolls. We're just laying out paper dolls right now. Flat, dead flat, nothing really even all that exciting. It's just a very simple layout with one tool that we've only used so far. So I'm going to approximate kind of the shape of my cab up here, or the motor housing. And then I'm going to finish up, let's see, we'll run around here and do the tail rotor. So I want to start making this turn up here, so I'm going to go back to edge mode. I'm going to pick an edge, and I'm going to alt drag up here. There's kind of a high point there. I'm going to alt drag another one out here. I'm going to rotate that edge so that it starts making that corner. I'm going to alt drag again. I'm going to rotate that edge again so it starts following kind of a predictable path around here. Now, you'll notice there's a little flat in this sketch right here, so I'm going to rotate this edge again, and I'm going to move it like that, and then I'm going to Alt-drag again to add the flat. I'm going to rotate it again, kind of get the right angle for it to go around that corner. And come down here, rotate again. Alt-drag out that little flat. Again, I don't have to get too crazy about laying this out because there's a lot of flexibility built in here where I can go back and straighten it out later. I'll drag up here. Maybe I'll give myself one more chance for making it circular. So I've kind of laid out the tail shape. Now, I'm going to go back up and I'm going to lay out the bottom part of the helicopter. So I'm going to kind of, maybe I'll move this vert here. Kind of back like that where the transition is going to happen. And then I'll go into edge mode and I'll pick these. And I want it to kind of roll in from here, and then I want an opportunity for it to roll in tighter. So I'm going to add two lines of faces here by picking an edge. I'm going to Alt-drag out, and I'm going to straighten these out. Very simply, just go in here and lay this out. Now, this is a little, you know, I'm sure tedious to watch because I'm doing the same thing over and over again. But I wanna kind of reiterate that this is just an insanely simple workflow to do. And then I'm going to go back to my edge mode. I'm going to pick these edges, which I selected that whole line of edges by double-clicking. And I'm going to Alt-drag out one more row. I'm going to go in and line these up. And you'll see that kind of these panels have kind of a predictable flow. It kind of makes sense where this stuff is all going. Kind of like a little, almost like a flow line or like an isoparam line or something like that. So, and this has got a little bit of a chin on it. So I'm going to put this there, go to edge mode, drag that chin in a little bit, and then I want to take a look and see what I have here. And I've got a little bit of kind of crazy geometry going on there, so I want to straighten that out. So these are all nice and organized, they make sense, everything's going where they're supposed to go. So the next thing I want to do is I want to build in this transition. So back to edge mode, I'm going to pick all of these. Actually, I'm going to pick this row. And I'm going to Alt-drag out a little one, which is going to allow me to make the transition under. And then I'm going to go to these, and I'm going to Alt-drag this one out, which is going to allow it to wrap back. Now, I want these to connect, so I'm going to go to Vert Mode. I'm going to pick these two, and I want them to snap together. So I'm going to use the Weld Points tool, and there's a cool little interface trick with the Weld Points tool. If I pick one, hit the Weld Points tool, and then pick the other, you'll notice that the first one snapped to the second one. If I pick both of them and then pick the Weld Points tool, you'll notice they snap together, which is actually what I wanted. So I pre-picked them, I snapped them together, and I'm going to go ahead and arrange this a little bit like this.
Kyle, just to add one thing, since your toolbar is kind of funky because they have to fit in that small screen, there's also the T-Spline's drop-down menu where you can access all these commands as well.
Yep.
So that will look the same on everyone's computer. So
great. Okay, so I've got my little transition step in here, so I need to build the rest of the boom. I'm going to move this over to here like that. And so I'm just going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to, you had to take my hotkeys away, didn't you, Matt? Keep going for those. I'm going to drag the tail boom out, and this will be the essentially the face of the boom. Go back to Vert mode. Just going to organize these a little bit so that they make sense. And this has been a lot of dragging and clicking, but in reality, I'm about 75% done with my model when I get done with this. So I want to connect these 2 points because I want this to be a continuous surface. So I'm going to pre-pick these points. I'm going to go to the Weld Points tool. I'm going to snap them together. And you'll notice that I get a red dot here. Red dots are something, if you've played with this a little bit and you've gotten into it, you've run into a situation where sometimes it'll say cannot toggle to smooth mode, or fails in smooth mode, or for whatever reason it kicks you out of smooth mode and dumps you into box mode. One of the things you should look for is red dots, and red dots mean that there's a piece of geometry that's not doing what it's supposed to do. And in this case, it's just a single vert, and that can't be resolved. That'll go away when I pick these 2 and weld points. You'll notice now this is an intersection that's resolved. T-Splines understands this, and this makes sense. So the red dot disappeared. Occasionally, you'll get a red dot out here in the middle of space, which will cause the model to not toggle smooth. All you have to do is select that and delete it, because what it was it's the remnant of an edge that was maybe inserted and then deleted, or a face that was inserted and deleted, or something. There's a remnant point that's hanging around. But if you see a red point, that's your first indication that there's something going on with the model that you need to address. The easiest way to deal with it is to look at adjacent points and see if it's unresolved, if it's just a single point hanging out in space, or if it's in the middle of an edge, just select it and delete it and see if that fixes your problem. So at this point, I've essentially laid out the entire body of my helicopter, so the only thing I need to do now is to make a few little adjustments to the overall shape, which I'm going to do very quickly, which I could do quicker if Matt let me have my hotkeys. And the only thing left to do is to add this little fin sticking out of here, which I'm going to do the exact same way. I'm going to pick, Alt drag, go back to my verts, add that up there. Now, I have an opening here, and if I go to my perspective view, you can see basically this is dead flat. And I want to specifically control the shape of this. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of real estate here. I'm going to open this hole up a little bit. And I'm going to insert another row of faces, because what will happen is this will end up being the flat face of it, and I need to create some room for this to roll over into the opening. So I'm going to open this up a little bit. I'm going to go to Edge Mode, and I'm going to select this entire edge ring. And using the same technique with a different tool, I'm going to use the Scale tool. I'm going to use the C-plane scale up here. I could go from the center, but I want to make sure that I'm sticking, right to my C-plane. So I'm going to grab this, holding down the Alt key, and I'm going to scale in to add 1 and maybe 2 rows of faces. We'll see. That should work. If it doesn't, I can always take it back out. So now, like I said, I'm pretty much, more than halfway done with the model at this point. All I need to do is, let me shade it so you can see what I have. All I need to do at this point is to add some thickness. Since this is a symmetrical model, I'm going to use the Extrude tool on the faces as opposed to the Thicken tool. If you saw me do the iron, I used the Thicken and then deleted the faces. I'm going to use the Extrude tool this time. So I'm going to pick all my faces. I'm going to extrude them out to give this thing some thickness. And you'll notice that it's got an open back, which is what I wanted, and it's got some thickness. Now if I toggle smooth at this point, it will resolve, and I'll get a nice smooth shape. Let me get a better shader on here so this is easier to see. Pick it in objects, and I should have a decent material in here that I can throw on it. All right. So now you can see what's going on. I get a really nice break over here from the thickness, and I'm in smooth mode here. So you can work in smooth mode. I prefer to work in box mode just because of the fact that if your box mode is right, your smooth mode will be a piece of cake. So all I need to do now is to start manipulating this to get my shape. So I'm going to pick a few edges here, and I'm going to pull these in. I'm going to pick these edges. I'm going to pull these in. I'm going to pick.
Hey, Kyle, we have a question that came in that I think would be good just to ask you right now.
Sure.
The question is whether you'll spend some time in a real design situation getting this, getting the edges more accurate to the shape parameters. And I thought that I'd just throw that out there because I guess just to ask you, is this a method that you have actually used or would actually use when making a real design for a client, and how do you get the shape the way that it needs to be?
This is the absolute positive exact process I use when I'm modeling stuff for clients, because the cool thing about T-Splines, well, one of the cool things about T-Splines is the fact that you can work in a really, really flexible way. You can, if you want to futz around with it, you can futz around with it. If you want to explore, you can explore. If you want to, if you want to try and nail something right off the bat, you can do that too. It's really kind of friendly from a designer point of view because it allows you to kind of find the way along the way as opposed to having to, build something to a sketch. Usually in the 3D modeling world, you're building a model based on a drawing that you've done and all this kind of stuff, and you're trying to interpret a design that's already made. In T-Splines, you kind of have the freedom to design it in 3D, which to me is really liberating, because instead of trying to make your decisions on a 2D sketch that we all know, if anybody who's tried to build something off a 2D sketch that someone's handed to them, 2D sketches don't always translate into good 3D models. So how cool is it to be able to then, actually design in 3D? You can actually kind of almost sketch, this as you're going and play with shapes, really without even having an input sketch. I used an input sketch here, but you don't even really have to. I've actually just sat down in T-Splines, thrown a few lines in space, and then just started building forms. And the cool thing about it is you can, basically watch this thing develop in front of your eyes and make your decisions based on, what's happening in 3D, as opposed to having to sit there and say, oh, well, does it look like my sketch? Does this highlight? What does this highlight do when I change this shape? And obviously, if you were designing a real helicopter, it would have to fly. But in this case, all it has to do is look cool. So, you've got the freedom to say, okay, well, I can come in here and start messing with this and see what develops and almost end up in a better place than you originally thought you were going to go. And that to me is really cool. It's kind of a very liberating experience to be able to come in here and start playing with light and playing with forms and see what happens as you start moving the shape around, as opposed to having to worry about whether or not you're hitting your sketch. So I'm going to pull this form out a little bit and get that highlight line to do what I want. And
so Kyle, here's just a follow-up question to that last one by someone else. So it goes, I agree that it's really cool to be able to sketch the model from scratch in 3D, but my clients demand my 3D work is to precisely match their 2D edges. I'm having trouble with accomplishing this in T-Splines and would love to see if it is possible.
Well, let me show you, and I'll show you that a little bit based on this opening here. If you have to hit a 2D shape, like say for instance you were designing a watch face and it had to fit around a mechanism, it had to hit the bezel, you can do that. And let's just go ahead and jump into that, because I think we're getting close to that point here. You notice what's going on. I'm getting really nice highlights in here. I can evaluate the form. I can grab some edges and move this around and watch the form update, watch the highlight change, and get it basically the way I want it. Let me just go to top view real quick and see what I've got here. Make sure this thing isn't looking too trout-like. All right, and grab a vert here. I'm going to straighten this out a little bit. All right. So we've got a basic shape here. So let's address this tail opening section. And in this case, I made a tube that this needs to match, and I've got this thrown in space. And you'll notice that it's a nice round circle. Actually, you know what? Let me just do this from scratch so you can see what's going on here. So what I'm going to do is go to my front view, and I'm going to draw a circle. And I'm going to throw it in here like that. And then just using Rhino tools, let me make sure this is relatively lined up. Just put that about where I want it. So let's assume that's a shape that I had to hit. Scale it down just a hair. I'm going to just extrude this off as a normal Rhino extrude. I'm going to pick this. Get in here. Pick this. I'm just going to extrude a surface straight in. Nothing complicated here. This is a NURB surface. I can see up here in my heads-up display it's indicating this is a surface. And I'm going to use the Match Surface tool, which is this one. And this will allow you to match a T-Spline's border edge. Oops. Oh, my hotkeys. I need hotkeys. T-Spline's border edge. I'm going to pick this whole thing first.
Kyle, you can also just do the edge loop selection even without the hotkeys.
Got it. Okay, so I've got that picked. I'm going to match surface. And the thing that I want to look for is this little dot. I don't know if anybody's used this match surface tool. If you don't look for this little dot, if I pick the surface to match to over here, I'm going to get this crazy twisted surface. When you pick your original curve, look for the dot, pick the surface to match to as close to the dot as you can. Pick this edge. Make sure that your arrows are going in the same direction. Hit enter. In this case, it's going to be curvature continuity. And if all works correctly, boom, T-splines will snap that edge to that tube, which I can now get rid of. And you notice that you have a nice, perfect circle there. Now, if you remember, I added 2 face rings in here because I wanted a little bit of room to play with this. And I think that what I'm going to do is take this edge loop out, because I think there's a little bit too much detail in there.
Yeah, Cal, could you actually show, if you open up you can just go to the drop-down menu, how you can select the edge loop? Just go to T-Splines, grip selection, or selection, I'm sorry. And you can do the loop, and that will select that whole loop for you.
All right, so I've got this loop selected. I'm just going to delete it. And you notice that that changes the shape of my opening, but my edge is still where I wanted it to be. So I can come in here and modify this a little bit to update my shape, but it doesn't change the shape that I snapped to. I get a gorgeous transition in and out of there that I can modify at will and get some really cool stuff going on. So you can kind of, sculpt and paint with highlights where, when you're trying to match a drawing, you're matching the drawing saying, oh, I hope this is going to look right. Where it's like here, you can kind of just, it's so easy to manipulate and it's so easy to change your forms that you can really, like I said, explore and try and find stuff that you didn't know was there to start with. So, so at this point, let me toggle back to box mode and let's just take a look at what's happening and make sure that everything makes sense. And basically, since the T-Splines model is a smoothed interpolation of this box mode, you want to make sure that everything in your box mode kind of makes sense. And there's a couple of things in here that, maybe this point feels better in here a little bit. Maybe this one feels better a little out here. And I'm just going to try and organize this a little bit so that it kind of makes sense. And it should all just kind of feel right when you look at it. You shouldn't have any crazy, super overlapping stuff going on here, or verts crossed up or anything like that. Like in this instance right here, this would probably be something that I'd want to go straighten out because I've got a vert crossing over another vert, and T-splines can handle it, but I don't know. It doesn't feel right to me, so I'm going to go straighten that out. So at this point, I can, I'm pretty comfortable with everything that's going on here. Maybe I'll add a little bit more belly to this thing just by doing this. And let's go back and toggle smooth. So I like everything that's going on here, but I think I want this highlight line right here to be a little sharper. And so I'm going to pick an edge, this one, and I'm going to insert another edge. And I'm just going to pick my tool. I'm going to add it up here. And you'll see the model will update. And you'll see that got a little sharper. And what's happening here is it's taking 2 panels for this edge to fade out. So it's going to essentially affect this model 2 panels out. And that's pretty much now doing what I want it to do because it changed the way that highlight went in. And at the risk of beating this to death, I'm going to just play with this. Watch how, see how the highlight changes there. I can just kind of go in and just paint with this light and get it the way I want it.
Hey Kyle, just some feedback from the watchers. Why don't you just go ahead and close that T-Spline's toolbar, and then you can use the drop-down menu and get some more screen real estate. Yeah, there we go.
So now I'm happy with my transitions. I've got these really great puddling reflections that are just blending into each other so gorgeously. I've got a really nice transition into this housing up here. Maybe I want to sharpen that up just a hair. But the first thing I want to do is I want to relax this model just a hair. And oh, now you're really killing me, taking away my toolbar too.
What are you looking for?
You know what? I need to have this back up. Sorry. All right, we'll use the little one. The Edit Layout button, if I right-click on this to make uniform, and then I pick the model, you'll notice how it just relaxes the transitions in between the isoparams a little bit, and it just has a slight improvement on the topology. Let me just take the wires away and you can see what's going on here. So at this point, the only thing left to do is to go into the top view, make sure everything's lining up down the center. And I'm going to throw some symmetry on this. So I'm going to pick this model. I'm going to do it in the Y. Accept that. And the model turned inside out, which is not a problem because all I do is use the flip normals. And you can see that I have the completed shape here. So I'm going to go and just do a few more little refinements on this. Oops, I reflipped it, sorry. And I think I have pretty much made the helicopter body. So the additional details that I had in there, if I turn these on, you'll notice that, see, I didn't use the original tube I had, so I blew my rotor opening, but all right. Everything else in here, the intakes up here, done the exact same way. The side pods were done the exact same way. The struts were done the exact same way. The blade was built in NURBS. The gun was built in NURBS. And the rotor was built in T-splines again the exact same way. It's just laid out the paper faces and then extruded them. So let me show you. I did some more detailing. Let me turn this on. Turn that off. And after I got to a certain point in the model and I was happy with the way the fuselage went, I went and converted all this stuff to NURBS. I booleaned them all together. I just used the Rhino fillet tools to make these transitions. And I projected curve on surface. I used the tube tool, or the pipe tool, to make pipes so that I could get my cut lines. And added some cut lines, added some windows, changed the shading, and voila, helicopter. So that's pretty much, what I have, and we're looking at, 44 minutes from the time that we got started to essentially a shape that is refined enough that you could start detailing it. It's not out of the realm of possibility to have an entire model like this completed, done, detailed in Rhino and everything in, an hour or two. So I know in my own personal business, when I look at the amount of time it used to take me to model something like this versus the amount of time that it takes to model something like this in Rhino or in T-Splines, it's not even a comparison. You know, the quality of the surfaces and the quality of the transitions and the quality of the highlights is so much better and so much faster using this T-Splines method that, you know, it's working its way into more and more aspects of my daily workflow. So that's pretty much the end of the demo that I have. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them, and we can just go from there.